So thanks everybody for joining this tool talk with Deepnote. And we have Jakub and Elizabeth of Deepnote. There isn't really any structure to this. So, you guys at Deepnote, however you want to structure the conversation, please feel free. But whenever you're ready, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for the intro. Maybe I'll kick it off and speak a bit about us, about the team. So I'm Jakub. I'm the founder of Deepnote. We are building a data science notebook. I'm mostly focused on actually quite a lot of stuff. So I'm working both on the product, I'm writing code, I'm doing lots of designs for our upcoming features and so on. Here with me, there is also Liz. She's our product manager. She is based in San Francisco. And we also have here who is another of our product managers. So I can maybe talk a bit more about the agenda, things that we could talk about today. I have a quick demo prepared. This is something that you all would be interested in. But at the same time, I feel like we are a pretty technical audience over here. So maybe we can just drop into some of the more interesting technicalities around how we built a Deepnote. Because, at the end of the day, building a data science notebook is not exactly the easiest thing. The product is pretty interesting on multiple levels. So here at Deepnote, we care about the whole experience, end to end, which means that we do a lot of work on managing the infrastructure. We do plenty of work on the application layer. This is something that you see when you sign up for Deepnote and what you're using. And also there are plenty of really interesting stuff around collaboration. We do real-time collaboration in Deepnote, which is pretty interesting technically around how to write these algorithms, how to make sure that everyone is in sync and so on. So if there are any questions, feel free to shoot. I'm more than happy to dig deeper and kind of talk more about behind the scenes and how we pulled off some features. And also, if there is interest, then we can talk about some of the upcoming features and the roadmap itself. I'll try to keep it relatively short. I mean, at the end of the day, Deepnote is for free. So we would just want to check it out. Feel free to sign up and try it out yourselves. So with that being said, I guess we can just jump right into it. And let me share my screen. This will probably be the easiest. So let me find it. And I'm not sure how often I will be able to check the chat, but if there are any questions in the chat, just feel free to speak up and I'll have a look. So if everyone can see my screen, we can begin. So look, here's our homepage. This is pretty simple. This is something that you can see yourself, but there are some interesting things to go through and kind of highlight. So people are coming probably from many different backgrounds, whether you are an analyst or data scientist or an ML engineer or just an straight up software engineer, not really having that much to do with data per se. There is something that caters to quite a wide range of audiences. It means that people who are coming from Jupyter might be pretty familiar with Deepnote by default because it's pretty much like a similar kind of workflow. But if you're coming from a non-data background, this is something that might feel very familiar to you as well. We primarily focus on collaboration, and I will show a couple of things how collaboration works in Deepnote. But at the end of the day, what we really felt in our previous experiences, building data science infrastructure or managing science teams, is that collaboration really is quite difficult in data science teams. And this is something that we might be much more comfortable with, let's say, in the software engineering world, where the ecosystem is a bit more mature and there are some existing workflows around how do you collaborate, how do you version your code, how do you push it to Git, which is probably hosted somewhere like GitHub or GitLab, how do you do code reviews and so on. But when it comes to data science workflows, especially the exploratory workflows, this is not so well understood. And this is something that I believe that Deepnote does very well. And it is a slightly different kind of features needed to pull this off. So yeah, let me jump right into dashboard to show you a quick demo of what you can do in Deepnote. What you are seeing here is our dashboard. This is what you will be looking at if you just signed up. Right here, my signed in with my personal account, and what you will see right here in the left dashboard are essentially two things. First, you can see my personal workspace. This is just a place for me to work on my own personal projects. Deepnote has a pretty large community, so there are a lot of people who are creating very interesting analysis, lots of interesting content, and then they are publishing it with sharing it with the community and publishing it out there to the public. But also there are lots of people who are using Deepnote in teams. So that's what we are seeing here. I'm a member of this team, which is called Subspace Analytics. This team doesn't exist. It's just here for demo purposes, but should be a pretty good idea, give you a pretty good idea of how it feels like. So where do we begin? Let's actually have a look and see what Deepnote is about. One thing we can do right from the start is that I can just show you a few interface features. So as you can see, you're probably familiar with all this notion of cells. We call them blocks. There are many more types of blocks, like it's not just code and markdown as you might be used to from other tools. We allow you to do more like vCivic editing. You can make more like input cells where you can just like place text inputs or date inputs. You can also do SQL cells, which allow you to query databases natively. We have visualization cells where you can show plenty of charts. So let me start with the hardware. And this is probably the first thing that's interesting to talk about when we talk about Deepnote, is that this whole experience comes with the underlying infrastructure. Whenever you are using Deepnote, we essentially come in and we give you a machine that you can use. Again, as I mentioned in the beginning, Deepnote is for free, so you can just come in and you can use this standard shared cloud resource, which is actually plenty fast for vast majority of data workflows. But if this is something that you want to use professionally, you can easily switch to pro machines, which has much higher limits on the memory and much higher compute. I mean, there are a bunch of these options, but equally, you can also use dedicated machines. So this is something that we allow our customers to do. So if you are the kind of person who works with confidential data that can't leave your, let's say, like AWS account or VPC, then we can also deploy Deepnote right in your VPC. So everything, like all the compute, all the data stays within your security boundaries. It's kind of difficult to set up, so it just goes through contact us form and we will help you set it up. But that option is there if you ever want to use it. So I mentioned.
So it works within like a VPC in AWS. Can you run, if somebody has their own hardware, could you run on that? Can you run on Google? Can you run on Ollie Cloud? Like what kind of limitations do you have for cloud execution?
Yeah, so by default, when you use Deepnote in the default settings, we are running in AWS,
in your AWS cloud.
We are running in AWS, but if you want to run this somewhere else, like we have tested this primarily in AWS and GCP. We haven't really spent much time trying to run this in with different providers. But if it's not supported today, that's something that's on our roadmap anyway. So it's just a matter of time until more clouds. And regarding the machines, like whatever is available in AWS, you can pick from your own machines right here. This doesn't exactly map to EC2 instances that you can see in AWS, because we are doing some smarter things around this. For example, it's a shared resource, so that just to make sure that your startup times are super fast. Then we essentially have one bigger machine and then split it up into smaller isolated containers. So you don't have to wait 7 minutes until EC2 machine starts up and gets ready to use.
Yeah. Faster than running just a spot instance. You have some version of that.
Exactly.
Cool. Can I run it?
So not right now. And quite frankly, this is something we are currently thinking about, whether it makes sense to even go this route. Because what we are seeing is that a lot of people at the end of the day are working in teams, and it is something that we want to make. We want to treat reproducibility as a first-class citizen. Doing the local execution becomes quite tricky. That being said, if you want to run this in your own cloud, that kind of gets you to almost like local execution. Depends how you look at it and what's your use case.
Yeah. Well, and some, I mean, there's some use cases where like the type of compute, like a GPU, like if I have a local GPU that I've purchased that I actually want to do my execution, like notebook, like a model training.
Yeah.
I want to
So
connect it to, like, I have a GPU sitting right in my office. How do I do that? Right.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Unfortunately, it is not something that is supported out of the box. Like I just can't go over here and say, hey, I want to connect to my local machine. However, there are many ways. I can show this later on, but long story short, what we give you is essentially full access to the underlying system. You can open up terminals. You can literally do SSH tunnels to your own machine. And if you have, if you set up a remote execution environment, this is something that you can do. It works really well with Spark and like these systems that have been built around remote execution. It doesn't yet work with, like, if you want to run a local Jupyter kernel on your own machine. There's not something that we support right now, but essentially the architecture allows it. We just haven't had a chance to prioritize it just yet.
Yep. Thanks.
Cool. So yeah, as I told about Deepnote was built around collaboration. So maybe you can just try it out right now, and I can invite you into this project right away. So this is my own personal project, super simple. I can go and say, hey, like, here is my project. I can open it up to public, set that everyone is going to have access rights. And let me actually see if I can post this right in the chat. God, how do I do that? 1 second. Here we go. So we should be in the chat. If anyone wants to join and play around, then welcome. One thing that you will need to do is you might need to actually create an account. However, since I've shared it from my personal account, that even anonymous users who haven't really used Deepnote before will be able to come in and execute the code. But by default, like, we don't encourage this. So yeah, that's never a good idea to open up computational environments to the wide internet. Anyway, so I can see a bunch of comments already coming in. So welcome everyone. As I mentioned, we are doing full real-time collaboration. So if I just go here and start typing a bunch of things, then I can see other people contributing as well. There is no delay, like there are no conflicts. It works really beautifully. And like, it can never happen to you that two people are working or want to work on the same project. They are all writing each other's changes. Once we're talking about collaboration, of course, what you have to do is then make sure that like history is working correctly. Like, you can always go back and see all the, let's say, all the snapshots. So I can just go in and see what are the things that have changed since I first opened up. But this is something that you can dive a bit later on. I see there's a question about how do we handle concurrency for text. If you want to go into low-level technical details, yeah, we have implemented OTs, operation transforms, which are then synced to our Redis cluster, so it's super fast. And yeah, if there's more interest, I can dive deeper into that. Cool. So now that we see the basics of the interface and of the collaboration features around comments and shared execution environments and history and so on, maybe I can just jump back into the dashboard and show you how you might want to use Deepnote in a more professional business setting. So as I mentioned at the beginning, in this demo account, I'm already a member of this team called Subspace Analytics. And there are a bunch of projects here. I already categorized them to different categories. People use Deepnote for real, like, super wide range of use cases. Maybe there's some admin stuff, like how do you handle GDPR requests? Then you can just go in and have a nice notebook which has actually, sorry about it. This is definitely not a notebook that I was going to show you. So yeah, it's kind of tools for managing some manual tasks. There are plenty of use cases around analytics. Maybe I can just jump right into this and show you how you can interact, for example, with Snowflake. So as I mentioned in the beginning, there are multiple different code blocks which you can use in Deepnote, so Markdown and code cells, But once you connect integrations, which is something that you can do over here, you can, in this specific project, I have already connected our Snowflake integration, which holds some data around retail analytics, but I can also connect integrations which are, some simple environment variables, usually for API keys. I can also connect to BigQuery, to Postgres, and there's actually quite a long list of all the integrations that we support natively. So how does the native support look like? So let me show you. So I can spin this up, this hardware, and you can see that there's like new block right here. Like if I go and create, like I can create this like native block, which is directly pre-connected to retail analytics database. So I don't have to like do all the, like write all the magics that we might be used to, for example, from Jupyter. This is something that is supported. You can always use magic, like we have full compatibility with, so you can go for it. But let's be honest, sometimes it's much easier to like have a native integration. So I can just go in, for example, like someone already came in and wrote this huge query, which has a very nice output. You can leave comments in there. And what's the best thing about this is that you can actually save the output, like this data frame that we're looking at right now. It gets stored in a df_1 variable, which they can use in, this is just like a standard Python cell. So if you want to do some filtering on this or do some pandas around it, that's something that's totally doable. We allow you to do visualizations right from here. So like if you don't want to spend too much time like playing around with Matplotlib or Plotly, you just literally one button away. You can choose whatever metrics are interested in, and we will show the visualizations for you. So now that we have this notebook ready with bunch of cells, maybe there is something that we can show you, like I can tell you about around this sidebar. As you can see, we have variable explorer, which means that all the variables that you are working with are listed right here, and you can easily interact with them, you can inspect them, and so on. I mean, this notebook doesn't really have any table of contents really, but it's something that you can also use. But most interestingly, one notebook, sometimes, I mean, you've probably seen it many times before, you want to keep your notebooks clean. So you might want to offload loading of the data set to a different notebook. So what you get is that by default, we kind of encourage people to keep their projects small, to make them nicely modular and shareable and reproducible. But if you need to load your data, it's super easy to create another notebook in the same project, and you can work with all these CSV files, and you can inspect them, and there's like a bunch of really cool stuff that you can do with it. You'll see there's something pretty interesting here. There's a Docker file. So if you are familiar with Docker, this is something that we actually fully support. I already mentioned that you can just go here and select any machine that you want, but sometimes you might want to choose your own environment. By default, when you open Deepnote, you get Python 3.7 environment. However, there are plenty more that you can use. We have native support for R, for a bunch of other libraries. You can go to our community and for example, find environments for Julia or Stata or anything else. But if there's something that like, let's say that your team has years of previous code base, like maybe there are some libraries that you want to import and you want to keep in your environment at all time, or maybe you have some Python packages that have been only published to your internal private registry, then you can go and define your own environment right here. It is pretty powerful. You can essentially import any Docker file that you have as long as it is some prerequisites. There's actually documentation right here which talks about how you can use pretty much any kind of environment with any kind of language, with some basic requirements of what it needs to contain. But you can go, we can do all the apt-get stuff. You have full root access to the whole machine and do whatever you want with it. Like if you want to create SSH channels or VPN connections to your own private network, that's something that you can totally do in Deepnote.
That's awesome, Jacob. That's something I haven't seen any of the other similar type notebook tools really give easy access to. Most are just doing like, give us a requirements file, but it's often not sufficient enough when you start to get into it to just have Python requirements, because the whole execution environment for Python is relevant. It's not as isolated as Python would like it, but
yeah, totally agree. And there are like lots of really interesting stuff that we had to go through to implement this. Like imagine that you are, giving full root access to people on the internet. So if there's any interest later on, we can show you how we sandboxed all these sessions. So it's like all super secure. And even though you have root access, you can actually like do anything crazy and so on. Like you have full terminals where just can go crazy.
I did have a question about the, oh, hey, sorry, I'm really dark. I did have a question about the environment setup there. It is really cool to see. So I was reading in the help guide that it recommends having like a knit notebook, and that is at the project level, right? So if I had different requirements, I could have a different project and just have a notebook there. But that made it seem like I could just on the fly switch between, just the regular default environment and something with custom libraries that are installed. Is that the case?
Yeah, 100%. So this is totally true. So we have two ways how you can customize your environment. Option A is that you can define your own Docker file. And option B is that every single time that you start the hardware, when you start a notebook, we will run this initialization script for you. So in this case, like we actually have a bunch of stuff in this notebook where we are installing glib SSL and like this by default, like if you have requirements.txt file in your file system, we'll install it for you. So it's like all automated. There is one advantage why you would want to do this in Dockerfile though, is that like let's say that your initialization takes forever. Like over here, like you might need to compile some libraries and so on, which could actually take a couple of minutes. And like especially if you have like a large requirements.txt file, it's pretty annoying. So if you create a Docker file, we will build it once and we will cache it for you. So next time you don't have to build like this whole set of libraries, you're just there and it's super fast to.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's really good to know. Thank you.
Awesome. So let's see what else we can have a look at. The same thing that I showed with Snowflake, you can do with BigQuery. So probably there is not much, there is not that much else to see. But lots of people are using it for not just analytics. A lot of people are writing whole documentation around their data stack. Pretty much every organization out there has so many databases, like this whole data warehouse where data is flowing in from multiple sources and they need a place to document it. So this is something that a lot of people do right in Deepnote. They just document all their data sources with simple examples, how you can query them and so on. Like some people go and take it like one step further and like imagine that you have a DevOps team which needs all these runbooks to make sure that like, if you are migrating a database, here are all the steps that you need to do if there is an outage on Sunday 2 a.m. Like what are the things that you should check in the first place? So a lot of people actually go and build all these runbooks so that whenever someone comes in, maybe a junior developer, they just find a pre-configured notebook where you can just like run cell by cell. It all gets logged so that when the senior engineer wakes up, like they see exactly like what were steps that were taken. They are all very well documented and so on. So there's like very interesting, like bunch of very interesting use cases. We of course use Deepnote internally to run all the demos, and maybe this is something that is kind of more of a example how lots of people structure their Deepnote workspaces. A lot of people just go in and create all these templates. You have probably seen it many times in the past. You're working on a team, and when you want to start a new analysis, you might want to start from some pre-existing project. So a lot of people go in and create like these templates for, let's say, if I want to visualize something in R, it's super easy for me to come in to duplicate this. I actually like to duplicate stuff into my private space so that like it doesn't clutter this whole team space, and they can just go in and like use all these R libraries, and there are some like pre-configured settings that you might want to have to speed up your workflow. So maybe one more thing to actually point out, you might have noticed as I was showing you around the interface there's this big, huge sign that says it's beta. So there's a reason for this. Even though Deepnote right now is used by quite a lot of companies, we have hedge funds, we have fintech companies, we have biotech companies, and this works extremely well for them. We are also we have lots and lots of stuff that we still want to build into Deepnote. So there are some features, like for example, there is this feature where you can build your own apps and articles, which is not available to all accounts just yet. But this is something that we are constantly working on and improving. So if you have any feedback or what would you like to see in Deepnote, we are more than happy to just talk to you and add it into our world. All right, let me actually show you one more thing. This might be pretty interesting. So you notice here that there is this special tab for integration with GitHub. This is something that lots of teams are already doing. They back all their notebooks into their GitHub workspace. Sometimes, and we have full native support for this. You just paste your link to your repo and it's done. No additional configuration is necessary. But we also do the versioning for you, because sometimes it's just annoying. If you're doing lots of exploratory analysis to try to figure out how do I name this commit and so on. So we actually do the history out of the box for you. So every couple of minutes we go and we make a snapshot of your project. And the cool part about this, that this is the whole snapshot. So not just your current notebook that you're working on, but if you also are working with CSV files and you're doing a bunch of things in a file system, we make sure that at any point you can go revert back to, let's say, 2 hours ago, and you will find the work directory, the environment in the exact same space as it was 2 hours ago. Again, there's some super cool stuff around how do we make sure that this is fast and it doesn't create too much overhead and so on. There's some magic with file system stuff, but yeah.
Are there some limitations to that? Because I've worked in projects where I'm recreating 100 megabytes of images, that I might do that several times, in a 10-minute period. I'm oh, this thing, then it would save, and so that can grow very unwieldy very fast.
Yeah, totally. So this definitely happens. So the way how we handle this is that we actually, behind the scenes, what we are doing is that we have actually 2 quotas. There is one quota for you here, is that you might see that by default you get 5 gigabytes of space per project. If you have a paid account, we can easily bump it up for you. It's not an issue at all. But we also have a separate quota for all your backups. We actually use the same algorithm that Time Machine on Mac is using. So first of all, we are only storing diffs, or what has changed between individual snapshots. And if the quota fills out, there's a simple algorithm that says we try to keep for the past 24 hours all the stuff that happened, all the snapshots for every 1 hour at least. Then older snapshots, we keep 1 snapshot per day, and then even older snapshots, we keep 1 snapshot per week. And if there's just lots of snapshots that you have and you are hitting that quota, then we go and delete the oldest snapshots for you. So in most cases, it's very nice experience, and it just it's kind of things that just works. Cool. So yeah, that's the rough background into Deepnote. There are plenty of other things that we could go through, when it comes to, for example, the ways how you can utilize Deepnote in your own company. There are plenty of restrictions, for example, what I did at the beginning, I shared my notebook with the rest of the world. Sometimes it's really not a good idea, especially if you have some internal data. So you can disable it for your whole team, so nothing like this ever happens. And there are plenty of other things. The reason why you would want to do this is actually pretty strong, is that a lot of people create their own projects and they like to share them with the world. So for example, this is our Explore page. Here are a bunch of projects that people created and shared with their team. And there are some really, really cool stuff. For example, I just opened something right here, which is an analysis of weird states in the US. Some people go and create pretty comprehensive tutorials, almost lectures for, let's say, scientific computing in Python. And as you can see, it is it is pretty extensive. And the nice thing about Deepnote is this is fully reproducible. You can just go in, you can press this button, you can launch it in your own workspace, and you can follow along this tutorial. Something that's super helpful, like if you are at the university and you have a class of 200, 300 people, you can just go in, create one like project for them, share it with the whole class, and they can go and, for example, like do their homeworks by themselves, or they can team up and do group projects and so on. Maybe one last thing to mention, we have a pretty active community. So if there is anything that you ever want to ask or showcase or just want to hang out, feel free to join us at community.deepnote.com, where we discuss like plenty of other things. We do some challenges, we do some competitions from time to time, and it's a lot of fun. With that being said, I guess let me just like open this up for any questions. Maybe even let me open up the chat that I haven't had a chance to look at, and see if there's anything else to go through.
Could you share a little bit more about, sorry, thanks. Could you share a little bit more about the versioning on the notebooks and how you might do like a review process or something?
Yeah, great question. So let's take, whatever this project right here. So the versioning itself is on by default. So as you can see, we run automatic snapshots, but also we do this for every single action. So when you execute a cell, when you modify a notebook, we know like all these things happen, and you can, let's say that, you come back to work on Monday and you want to see like what happened the whole previous week. It's all here. You can see what people are working on. But if you want to do snapshots, you can create your own snapshots. You can give them some message, so that like when someone else comes over, they can do quick diffs and see what exactly changed. There are plenty of other things we are thinking about how to improve that the review process. But quite frankly, as of right now, like the way how we're using Deepnote internally is that someone comes in, they do a first rough draft of their analysis, and we just like drop right in. We do all the code review in the comments, and once people are happy with it, we can just go in and resolve the comments, and it's like a very nice experience. Sorry, I couldn't quite hear it. Are there any other questions or anything that maybe I should talk more about, or anything that you are interested in?
I did have one more question. So yeah, I can definitely see like how I would use this if I was doing like a one-off piece of analysis and wanted to like share it with somebody. I saw that you can also like schedule notebook runs, and like if I had, if I was building like some machine learning model and I wanted it to run on a schedule, but I didn't want it to be in one huge monolithic file, like as things stand right now, if I wanted to like break that out and have like a multi-stage pipeline, would I have to do that somewhere else? Or like, is that something that you're looking at? I know that not every tool can do every single task, but I'm just curious about where you are now and what the plans are in that area.
Yeah. So first and foremost, what we are focused on, we want to build really like the best notebook. Like that's what we care about. So right now, like if we want to build, let's say, like pipelines, what we try to do is to integrate super deeply with other tools that are doing all these things. So sometimes, look, if you are going to process huge amounts of data, you might be better off using a tool dedicated to this. With that being said, quite often you actually don't have to. Like you can do lots of these things right in Deepnote. So yeah, as you already mentioned, we have scheduling. So I can just go in, I can enable scheduling for whatever interval, and we do some more advanced things right there. We can send you a notification, like if the run succeeds. We can send you a notification when there is an error in your workflow. We also do republishing. So like when I showed you, for example, this article right here. Let's say that you want to publish this as kind of like a dashboard. What you would do is that you would say, hey, I want to rerun this notebook on a daily basis at 8:47 p.m. and then I would like to republish it so that people see the most recent version of it. And also, like when you open up this notebook, like it's all ready for you with the latest data. If you want to do this on a larger scale, by default we tell you like, hey, you should run only one notebook. But thanks to essentially the full power of anything that you might ever want, like root access and anything, well, we actually support all the Jupyter magics. So we can very easily create a cell here. And I don't remember the magic from top of my head, but you can essentially say something like something include, and you just do loading data. What was the name of the file? Yeah, loading data.ipnb, and that's the way how we can run all these notebooks in a row. And by the way, so you might have noticed all these things that I was typing. So yeah, we have autocomplete. I mean, this is something that I'm personally proud of because, oh my God, I spent so much time on this and it was like quite difficult to. So you can do like, we have full autocomplete for all the variables that you have when you are doing your analysis. We can actually do a lot of these autocompletes for your schemas in your database. So we do this for Snowflake, we do this for Postgres, for BigQuery, for essentially like everything that you can imagine. There are some things that we don't support just yet. For example, our autocomplete game in like Julia environment is not exactly the best, but we are trying. So yeah, it works. It works really well for most cases.
I have a question. So a typical dev environment for me, even if it's, well, this is part of my problem in the cloud. I am typically developing something in a notebook, but then taking bits of it and migrating it into a module, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe I edit the module a little bit, have it auto reload into the notebook. So I have this conflict right now that I don't have a good solution for of I'm editing a Pi module and I'm editing a notebook simultaneously and like executing the notebook.
Yeah.
And the way I have it solved is that like I have a Docker container. And yeah.
I think I know what you mean. That's something that I think a lot of people struggle. Like how do they productionize their notebooks and how to make sure like they are modular and they are usable and so on. So one thing that like, this is something that was really important to us as well, because yeah, literally like every single time that we are working on some bigger project, like there's always this file called like helpers dot, which has
whatever it is. Yeah.
all this content and so on. Well, full support for that. So if you don't want to use the notebook environment, well, the same features that I just showed you around real-time collaboration work in this environment as well. So you can just do and go crazy with it. Once you even pair this with GitHub integration, you can just keep, like that's what a lot of people actually do. They link their GitHub repo. So let's say they have a repo that's called, let's say, helpers. And it will create a new directory which is going to be synced with that GitHub repo so that you can just like import straight from there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And yeah, by the way, like one more thing that you mentioned is probably like that handover, like how do you convert notebooks from like this prototype to an actually like production code. So we don't have any specific tools right now that would like say like automatically take this notebook and convert it into a Python script. However, again, since they have like full support for existing Jupyter ecosystem, and you can use literally everything, like any tool that you can imagine, well, it's actually super easy to run a command in the terminal to NB convert this IPNB file, just standard JSON file at the end of the day, and you can transform it into whatever you want. But what we are really seeing more often is that like we have a data science team which produces this amazing analysis. They literally just go here, they invite their engineering team, and the engineering team will just have this like frame of reference. They'll be able to experiment with it, and they will integrate it into in a different code base, kind of like more on a separate basis. The important part here is that like what you are sending to your engineering team is something that's fully reproducible. They can go in, they can ask clarifying questions in comments and so on.
Okay, so I don't see, so I just did this in that the shared folder that you shared with us
Mhm.
with your 01 notebook.
Mhm.
If you go back to that one.
Yeah.
Starter project, yeah. Okay, so helpers. So I made helpers.py. Like that's the script. You can click on that. So I don't see how I would make comments.
Oh yeah. So the comments are not supported just yet
Okay, that makes sense.
in the files. This is something that we are working on right now, but it's not there yet.
Okay, this is cool.
But the whole like versioning.
So
yeah.
So in some ways, you're recreating a lot of the editor environment, right?
Mhm.
Have you thought about trying to like integrate VS Code into it?
Yeah. So we try to really focus on the notebook environment first. I mean, there are plenty of other directions that we can go to, and like for example, text editing is one of them. As you can see, it is not exactly like the full first class experience with all the features that you might see in VS Code. We do all the autocompletes here as well, but when it comes to like, we are not here to replace VS Code. Like if you want to use more advanced debuggers or whatever, we actually try really hard to make sure that you can sync it through some other system that you might be using, or you can, I mean, you can literally go crazy. You can open up a terminal, you can create a session that you can SSH into from your local computer, mount the whole thing into your local,
that makes sense.
and just like run VS Code locally so that it edits code in Deepnote. It's kind of crazy. We don't have a tutorial around this, but yeah, it's possible. That's how we were architecting this.
Okay, cool. It's nice to see.
Cool. And I know we scheduled this only for, I think, for 1 hour. I can go a few minutes over time if there is need. But at the same time, I want to be super respectful of everyone's time. So maybe we can just, if there are any in the last few questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, and in general, folks know that, locally optimistic, you can always kind of continue the conversation in that Slack channel if folks need to as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like you know my name, like Elizabeth's name or Ito's name. Feel free to message us in Slack, and we're happy to continue the conversation there. Awesome. So if there are no other questions, let me turn off my screen sharing.
Cool. Well, Jakub, thank you very much for that demo, and thanks for the great questions from everybody, Dylan, Lewis, and everyone else.